So, listen to this. Maradona was as troubled as he was a genius. His life took an insanely tragic path that no one could have predicted. He went through every kind of scandal imaginable, from massive brawls to partying like a madman, cheating on his girlfriend an infinite number of times, becoming basically a slave to the Italian Mafia, getting caught, doping, being banned from football, firing paintballs at the paparazzi, and even saving people from a shipwreck. Everything Maradona did just had to have that little bit of controversy mixed in. Even when he passed away, his death occurred in mysterious circumstances, with the doctors being investigated for their actions. It was a wild life, and this is certainly a wild video. From the very beginning, he made sure to raise some eyebrows, making it public that he was angry over not being called up to the World Cup at the age of 17. But in reality, he did sort of have a point. Soon, he had made Argentinos Juniors one of the strongest teams in Argentina, already being named by some magazines as the best player on the planet before he even left his hometown club. And indeed, just 3 years later, he would be joining Barcelona as the most expensive player of all time. However, once there, things didn't go as expected. Don't get me wrong, his performances were impressive, but the club was worried. They had been warned that at Maradona's house, people were always coming in and out, the party never stopped. And after just 15 matches, one of the doctors noticed that Maradona's eyes looked oddly yellow, so a check was done. And it came out that he had hepatitis. Just like that, he was out for 3 months. But the controversies didn't stop there. Once he was back with the squad, he even got them to change the training schedule so he could sleep in the morning because he surely wasn't gonna leave the parties to go to sleep early. He demanded they pay him extra for every friendly he played. He got into arguments with the president all the time, who once was invited to have dinner in Maradona's house in order to make amends, only to get there and find the place swarming with girls. And strangely enough, that same year, Maradona even found and helped rescue 2 people who had survived the shipwreck when he was relaxing in his yacht. Yeah, his life never got boring, but still, none of this compares to what was about to come, or even to what was already happening in the background. Amongst the city's nightlife, Maradona had been introduced to illegal substances, and if you somehow don't see how this would affect his game, let me quote the man himself. In the beginning, it makes you euphoric. It's like winning a championship, so you think, who cares about tomorrow if I won the championship today? Still, as worried as Barcelona were, a new season started and they hoped this time things would play out more smoothly. But instead, by the 5th match of the season, Goicoechea, known as the Butcher of Bilbao, broke Maradona's leg. In fact, they even say the Butcher kept the boots he was wearing and proudly displayed them at parties. This could have easily ruined the season, I guess. It could have ruined his career. But instead, Maradona surprised everyone by making it back after just 3 months, and in the final match day of the season, the stars aligned in the worst way possible. Barcelona would face none other than Bilbao in the final of the Copa del Rey. Maradona was out for revenge. He just had to steal the trophy from them, so once it did not go his way and the Bilbao substitutes rushed the pitch provoking him, Maradona was unforgiving, knocking one of them unconscious with a knee to the face and jump-starting one of the most disgraceful brawls in football history. So, with the riot police having to force their way into the pitch, and with the King of Spain watching in the stands, this brought Barcelona immense shame and led the president to decide that Maradona's time at the club was over. But in reality, this was actually beneficial to Maradona, as his agent and childhood friend Jorge Sitterspieler had led him close to financial ruin with some poor investments. So a move out to Italy, the richest league in the world, seemed like the perfect opportunity. After all, once his transfer to Napoli was arranged for 5 million British pounds, he had been made the most expensive player of all time once again. Many found this move strange. Why would the best player in the world join a team who just finished 1 point off of relegation? Well, it fit his style. Maradona was a hardcore communist who would go on to tattoo Che Guevara on his right arm. Saving the poor underdog club whose fans were continually victims of xenophobia was right up his alley. But yet, there was another question. How did Napoli, a team that was severely struggling financially, manage to fund the greatest transfer in the history of the sport? Well, right at his first press conference, a journalist would put that into question. I would like to ask if Maradona knows what a camorra is, and if he knows that their money is everywhere, even in football. And before you ask, I'll explain. The camorra was the name given to the Mafia in Naples. From illegal substances to counterfeiting, loan sharking, and even match fixing, they had their dirty hands everywhere. In fact, they were notoriously close to the club, and if there was any doubt that this was a sensitive topic, once the president intervened, stopping Maradona from answering the question and having the journalist escorted out by security, everyone got a good idea of what had happened there. And if you need more certainty, in 2019, the nephew of Carmine Giuliano, the Camorra's very own godfather, confirmed that the signing of Maradona was not only organized by him, it was his idea. But what did the mob want from Maradona? It was a way of displaying their power. They enjoyed being seen with the great Maradona. They paraded him around all kinds of events, from parties to inaugurations. He even said that it was the golden age. Everywhere I went, they gave me another Rolex. Besides that, with the north of Italy being extremely prejudiced against the south, the Camorra was always looking for a way to get revenge, and to rob them of the chance of signing Maradona was like taking what they loved most, their football. And let me tell you, considering their rivals spent the next 7 years chanting about how they would have to sell their stadium to pay for Maradona, among some other more inappropriate chants that I just could never repeat, I'd say it stung pretty bad. After all, over the next 2 years, Maradona took the league by storm. It is even said that his free kick against Juventus that led Napoli to their first win over them in 13 years caused 5 people in the stands to faint and 2 others to suffer heart attacks. That's how much he meant to people. Just like that, Napoli were suddenly in the league's top 3. The love for Maradona had become a worldwide phenomenon, and then came the cherry on the cake, the 1986 World Cup. It was the greatest World Cup performance of all time. However, of course, even in maybe his greatest moment, Maradona gave us the infamous hand of God. Imagine this, at the time, Argentina and England had been at war over who had the right to rule the Falkland Islands, and Argentina had come out defeated. So, to send England out of the World Cup was of the utmost importance to the Argentinians, but to do it by scoring with your hand, by scoring the most controversial goal in the history of the sport, was the coldest revenge ever served. Still, that year, things began getting more and more complicated for Maradona. His girlfriend was pregnant with his first daughter, but then, to the surprise of no one, another woman came out to the press claiming that Maradona was the father of the baby boy she had just given birth to. Regardless, he would refuse to claim the baby as his own, and sure, it could have easily been brushed off as a Billie Jean scenario, but not only did the kid look so much like Diego, but it only got worse when he grew up and showed that he was incredibly talented at playing football. That same year, he also made some covers by traveling all the way to Cuba to meet his idol Fidel Castro, which left many Italians with a bitter taste in their mouths. But above all, nothing marked this time in his life like the escalation in his addiction. If before this point he could have argued that it was merely recreational, by now it was clearly something more than that. It became clear that the Camorra was using it to keep a hold of him. If at first Maradona claimed he only got along with them because he was just trying to stay on their good side and keep his family safe, now he had become so dependent that he had no way of saying no to them. He had become their property. And it only became worse the year after. In 1986-1987, Maradona finally pulled off the unthinkable, leading Napoli to become champions of Italy. If before he was the king of Naples, now he was their god. The adoration had been taken to a level never seen with any footballer even to this day. Everyone was naming their kids Diego. There were murals painting him like a saint everywhere in the city. The people literally called him Dios. Just picture this. One time he went to get a blood transfusion and a nurse stole some of his blood samples and then had them blessed by a priest and set up in a church for exhibition. As I once heard a journalist saying, I eventually realized the Neapolitans didn't live for themselves or for their children or anything else anymore. They lived for Maradona, to watch him play on Sunday. And with everyone obsessing over every little detail of Maradona's life, it became a bit too much, especially for the Camorra, who, despite their exuberance at times, did not enjoy that kind of exposure. Maradona was becoming a problem to them, and considering how the Camorra tends to deal with their problems, things were heading down a dangerous path. And in the following season, something very strange happened. With 5 games left, Napoli had only lost 2 games all season and were all set to repeat their historic win, having a 4-point advantage to Milan in a time when a win would only warrant them 2 points. But then it happened. They played Juventus and lost, they played Verona and got only a draw, then Milan, Fiorentina and Sampdoria 3 more defeats. It was the greatest choke football I'd ever seen. Or was it? Because very quickly people added 2 and 2 together. As much as the Camorra loved Napoli, every single person in the city had put their money on them winning a second title to very favorable odds, because remember, that first title was never supposed to have happened, so now that they seemed so close to doing it again, they ran the numbers, and the conclusion could shake even the most cold-hearted of mob bosses to his core. They would have to pay out 200 billion lira, $400 million in today's money, to the people of Naples. Nowadays, investigations have literally proved that they would have gone bankrupt, so as you may imagine, with match fixing as their favorite pastime and the club dangling in the palm of their hands, the solution was very obvious. Napoli had to throw the matches. And if you don't believe that Maradona would just bow down to their will when glory was so close, let me tell you that over those last matches, several players were the target of some mysterious events. One day, Maradona walked into the parking lot to find his car completely destroyed. One of his teammates came back to his home to find that he had been robbed, not once, but twice. And then, suddenly and conveniently, it all stopped, right at about the same time as Napoli began losing one match after the other. Regardless, even if the following year they finished second once again, to the great pleasure of everyone in the city, they also defeated Bayern, Eintracht Frankfurt and even Juventus with a 3-goal comeback to win the UEFA Cup. Maradona had led them from relegation to champions of Europe in just 5 years, but now it was at a crossroads. He felt his time at Napoli had reached its peak, and since he'd rather just live while on top, he requested a transfer, but it just wouldn't be that easy. Clearly, there were forces at play that wouldn't allow him to take the easy way out, and out of love for the fans, he refused to force his exit. So instead, we got a media circus, because you know damn well that as great as Diego was, he really couldn't keep his mouth shut. But the drama only made things worse, and soon, Maradona just couldn't take it anymore. Even when he stayed inside his house, the journalists would peep through his curtains, so to escape from all of that, right after the final whistle was heard on Sunday, he would rush into some random nightclub and he'd stay there, partying while barely ever sleeping all the way till Wednesday, when he would start his cleanse alongside his personal trainer, sweating it all out, hopefully in time to play at his best on Sunday. He was living in a toxic roller coaster, an unsustainable and destructive cycle, and it wouldn't be long before it became clear how much it had damaged him, how much it had changed him. So much that eventually his personal trainer, who he had grown very close to, had to tell him that, for Diego, I would go to the end of the world, but for Maradona, I wouldn't take a single step. To which he would reply, yeah, but without Maradona, I wouldn't be here. Though he refused to accept this theory, it became evident to many that indeed, the joyful young boy known as Diego had been consumed by his own alter ego, Maradona, a fake persona he had built in order to cope with the pressure of being seen as not only the savior of Naples, but the world's greatest player, while, in the background, he was the furthest thing from a role model. Yet, among all of this, even with mandatory doping tests being a thing, Maradona wasn't ever caught. There are many theories. Maybe the Camorra was bribing the officials, maybe he was getting urine samples from somebody else. That is even a huge conspiracy theory that he used a hidden device in his boxers to fake the urine tests, but soon it wouldn't matter much. By the end of the season, despite all of this mess, Maradona would still manage to inspire Napoli to another Scudetto, and among the celebrations, in a conversation with the president, he would even be heard saying that we can't win every time, otherwise it becomes boring for them. Which many believe to be a hint at the fact that their choke 2 years before had indeed been a result of match fixing. However, at this time, there was also a huge shift in Italy. A journalist once described it by saying, Maradona was a huge disappointment for most Italians because they expected him to be a star, but they never expected that he would win. As soon as he started winning, he became insufferable. And with perhaps the worst timing ever, it was right then that Maradona decided to say something that would have every Italian wishing him the worst. It was the 1990 World Cup. Maradona felt this was the moment that would define his career. To be the star in 2 consecutive World Cups would be his greatest achievement. He was so overmotivated by this ambition that it is even said that he managed to go cold turkey. The tournament would be played in Italy, and with them and Argentina being the previous winners, when they both met in the semi-finals, emotions were already bound to be high, but it was made much worse by the fact that the match would be played in Naples, and even more so when Maradona took an interview as the opportunity to address the Neapolitans on TV, claiming that Naples isn't part of Italy, so if they want to see me happy, they could support Argentina. This backfired immensely. As much as the Neapolitans loved Maradona and felt ostracized by the rest of Italy, when it came to the national team, they joined forces and forgot all that separated them. So, all that Maradona got out of this was having the entire country against him, and once it all boiled down to him scoring the penalty that would knock Italy out, things got out of hand. So much so that over the next couple of days, an Italian newspaper ran a study to assess who the most hated man in Italy was, and above any dictator or political figure, the #1 villain was Diego Maradona. And so, the day of the final, the Italian crowd booed the Argentinian national anthem, leading Diego to curse them out on live TV. Not to mention that, to make it all worse, he wouldn't even win the final. After that, everything would be in complete disarray. At Napoli, performances quickly became just plain embarrassing. In his day-to-day life, Maradona became paranoid, constantly feeling like he was being persecuted, investigated, scrutinized, and in January, it all hit the fan. The police arranged an operation to bring down the Camorra, planting wiretaps, and quickly they listened into the voice of Maradona out there actually handling business for them. That's how bad it got. They had him in the palm of their hand, working for them like an errand boy. And with the tapings getting him tied into a prostitution-related investigation, at first, there were rumors that he was to be sentenced to 20 years in prison, though he managed to get it reduced to 1 year and 2 months of suspended sentence and a fine of 5 million lira, but still, it didn't stop here. In March, Maradona was finally caught with traces of illegal substances in his urine, and that was strange because none of that was new, so how come he was caught this time around? Well, the Camorra had had enough. They felt that since his downfall, his presence didn't bring them the same prestige as before. Plus, with Napoli performing terribly, he was no longer of much importance to the team, and with this new extra attention on him, he was putting their organization at risk. So, to get rid of him, they set him up. They stopped paying off the anti-doping committees and never warned him. After all, that was the perfect way to get rid of him while diverting everyone's attention away from their affiliation. So much so that once Maradona was sentenced with a 14-month ban from playing football, not a single club representative was present in court. In fact, the length of the ban was also especially strange, given that on average, in a case like this, the player would get just 6 months. It was actually so abnormal that Maradona became convinced FIFA wanted to finish him off, that for one reason or the other, they wanted him to be gone for good. However, the most shocking scenes played out as he left for Buenos Aires to wait it out until he could play again, as there were no fans at the airport. As Maradona said it himself, "When I arrived at Napoli, there were 86,000 waiting for me, but when I left alone." This was rock bottom. Once in Buenos Aires, he felt safe. He went about his normal life, though I'm not sure the word still applies, given that he was still living the same lifestyle, completely immersed in endless nights out and rarely ever sober. What he didn't expect, however, was that his homeland wouldn't be much more welcoming than Italy, as 2 weeks after his arrival, the house he was staying in was raided by the police and Maradona got caught in possession of illegal substances. The only thing that saved them was that by then, his sentencing for the wiretapping scandal had not yet been brought to an end, so his lawyers managed to get the new charges to be grouped in with his previous ones. Otherwise, who knows what could have happened. Once his ban came to an end, he joined Sevilla, and though for a while everyone was fooled thinking Maradona had found a new home and safe haven, by the second half of the season he spiraled out of control. From the old nightclub life to racing his Porsche around town to destroying a locker room after being subbed off and finally getting into a physical confrontation with the coach, his days were numbered once again. And as he joined Newell's Old Boys, we witnessed a similar scenario. Maradona arrived to great excitement from the fans, only for him to play 5 matches, injure himself, get in trouble with the coach, and finally attack the paparazzi who were trying to spy on him by firing paintballs at them, injuring 4 people and getting another suspended sentence of 2 years and 10 months. Still, at that time, Argentina was struggling so much to qualify for the World Cup, having to win a 2-game playoff in order to make the cut, that even if he had barely played that season, the entire nation began calling for Maradona, and he delivered. But no matter what, once at the World Cup, everyone was questioning how they would deal with his substance abuse. Some even theorized that FIFA was running an operation to prevent him from being selected for doping tests, as the USA, as the hosts, worried that this edition of the World Cup lacked a true superstar. But then, right on his first match, Maradona scored, and as he ran towards the camera, it became obvious to everyone that he was in some kind of altered state. So, from there on out, it was a matter of time. Even if FIFA had some plan to hide it, now it was out in the public. They were forced to do some damage control, and so, once the second match ended, the police were waiting for Maradona. It was time to be tested, and to the surprise of no one, they found performance-enhancing substances in his system, leading to another 15-month ban. Many thought this would be the end of Maradona's career, but after spending a year working as a coach, a move was set up for him to return to Boca. However, that season, though there would be glimpses of Maradona's magic, after some disappointing performances, he got heavily criticized by the media, who also didn't find it funny that he celebrated a goal by kissing Caniggia on the lips, eventually forcing him to announce that he was retiring, as he admitted that he was tired of seeing his daughters cry. By August of the same year, he would move to Europe to get rehabilitation from his substance abuse, but to say it didn't work would be an understatement, as the moment he came back from retirement and joined Boca once again, it instantly became obvious how horrible of an idea this was. Since the very first time they tested him, he was banned again. Maradona's lawyers strangely still managed to get him back on the pitch, claiming he had been set up, but soon after his dad asked him to retire as he could not take the stress brought upon his family by the media, and Maradona obliged, and this time for good, though the drama kept on going outside the pitch. As the year 2000 started, he managed to hit a new low, overdosing and spending 2 days in a coma. Thankfully, Fidel Castro then managed to put some sense into him, bringing him to Cuba, where he would join a rehabilitation facility with Castro visiting him daily. However, after leaving, even if Maradona would claim that Fidel had saved his life and that he was like a second father to him, only 3 years later, he would admit that he wasn't clean, even saying that he was losing the battle for sobriety and that he was losing by a knockout. Not to mention that he was also ordered to pay £33 million in taxes to Italy, to which he insisted he'd not be paying them as he owed them nothing, though that meant he was from then on forbidden from entering the country, still insisting on traveling there at one point, only to get all of his jewelry confiscated. Eventually, by 2008, he did get in much better shape and got arguably the cleanest he had been in decades, taking over the Argentinian national team at the 2000 2010 World Cup before moving on to club football and living a far more quiet life than before, even deciding to finally acknowledge his illegitimate son, which was pretty nice to see. And though the last years of his life brought on some more media attention, may it be for his health problems or for suspicion that his habits had made a comeback, especially after some unusual behavior at the 2018 World Cup. Then, on the 25th of November 2020, 13 days after going through brain surgery and at just 6 years of age, Maradona passed away from heart failure. Even after his death, one last piece of drama came to light, as Maradona's healthcare team was put under investigation for suspicion of medical negligence and involuntary manslaughter, possibly having to face 8 to 25 years in prison, as investigators claimed the signs of his incoming heart failure were visible 12 hours before he was pronounced dead, and that the team had simply ignored them, with one specialist claiming that after the brain surgery, Maradona did not have the mental capacity to look after himself and was left by the medical team in a situation of helplessness, abandoned to his fate.